She thought therapy was sacred, a place to unravel pain, not multiply it, a space for healing, not harm. But the moment she stepped into that room, truly vulnerable, she unknowingly entered an arena, not with colorful tracksuits and obvious guards, but with diplomas on walls and tissues on tables. Do you think maybe you're too emotional? That question wasn't therapeutic insight. It was the starting gun. The first shot in a psychological survival game she never agreed to play. Welcome to the empathy game, where the players wear vulnerability like green tracksuits and the guards disguise themselves as healers. Unlike Squid Game's obvious brutality, this arena operates in shadows. No dramatic eliminations, just slow psychological erosion. No cash prize, just the predator's satisfaction of watching you break. No clear competitors, just you against someone who studies your wounds like a player memorizing marble patterns. The rules are simple. 6 rounds, 6 childhood games twisted into weapons. Each round begins with nostalgia for safety and ends with the realization that the person across from you was never playing the same game. Round 1, red light, green light. They watch you move toward vulnerability, then strike when you're exposed. Round 2, sugar honeycomb. They make you carve out your boundaries with impossible precision while they hold the needle. Round 3, tug of war. They pull you toward their version of reality until you lose your footing. Round 4, marbles. They betray you with tears, making you hand over your most precious truths. Round 5, glass bridge. They disappear, leaving you to fall through the silence. Round 6, Squid Game, the final choice between their rules and your freedom. But here's what they never tell you. The only way to win is to refuse to play. Round 1, red light, green light, the charm phase. The most dangerous manipulator doesn't raise their voice. They lower it, just enough for you to lean in. And in that moment, while you're disarmed by their apparent empathy, they slip the knife in with surgical precision. You don't bleed right away. In fact, you feel seen, heard, understood. But that's the trick. The pain always comes later. In round 1 of the empathy game, charm is the entry ticket. It's red light, green light. But instead of movement triggering elimination, it's disclosure. You speak, you share, you open your wounds, thinking the other person is standing beside you. But they're not beside you. They're watching from a tower, counting your weaknesses, recording your emotional patterns. They smile, you move, and just like in any survival game, that's when the bullets start flying. Dr. Sarah Chen thought she'd found salvation when she entered his office. 25 years old, raw with unhealed childhood trauma, desperate for safety. This new therapist, Dr. Marcus Reed, seemed different, warmer, more intuitive. He had kind eyes, a gentle voice, and an uncanny ability to ask exactly the right questions. "Tell me about your relationship with your father," he'd say, leaning forward with apparent concern. And she would tell him everything, the alcoholism, the unpredictable rages, the way she learned to read emotions before she could read books. He called it inner child healing. She called it salvation. For months, this dance continued. He remembered details she'd forgotten. He noticed patterns she couldn't see. He validated experiences others had dismissed. For the first time in her life, she felt truly understood. But understanding is different from empathy, and remembering details isn't the same as caring about them. The shift was subtle. When she cried, his responses became clinical. When she celebrated victories, his enthusiasm felt rehearsed. Then came the week she questioned him. She questioned a suggestion. She questioned his approach. That's when the smile changed. The warmth drained from his eyes. His voice went flat, cold. "Are you sure your trauma isn't just a way to avoid taking responsibility for your life?" The words hit like a physical blow, because that wasn't a therapeutic question. It was a weapon. A weapon forged from her own confessions and fired at point-blank range. In The Sociopath Next Door, Dr. Martha Stout warns that sociopaths often gravitate toward helping professions. They're not always violent or obviously dangerous. Often they're charming, caring, seemingly spiritual. They love your stories not because they empathize with your pain, but because they study it. Every detail becomes data in their psychological database. They're emotional archaeologists, excavating your wounds not to help you heal them, but to understand exactly how to reopen them when needed. Have you ever shared something vulnerable with someone, only to have it thrown back in your face during a conflict? Have you ever noticed how some soothing people feel strangely hollow underneath their warmth? Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling somehow emptier despite being heard? That's round one, the charm phase. The moment you mistake observation for care. The moment you assume kindness equals safety. But in the empathy game, nothing is what it seems. The kindest smile can hide the cruelest intentions. The most attentive listener might be the most dangerous predator. Round one teaches us that emotional vampires don't drain you with fangs. They drain you with fascination. They don't attack your body. They attack your trust. And they don't leave physical scars. They leave you questioning whether you can ever trust your own instincts again. But round one is just the beginning. In round two, you won't be manipulated with smiles. You'll be manipulated with something far more insidious, your own conscience. Round two, sugar honeycomb, the guilt game. You're too emotional. 4 words, softly spoken, maybe with a slight sigh, and yet they land like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of your arguments. You were mid-sentence, explaining why a boundary mattered, why something didn't feel right, and then, boom, guilt detonates. Not in them, in you. In round two, the rules are simple. The first person to feel guilty loses. But the dark empath never plays by those rules. They never feel guilt. They manufacture it in you. Like a chemist mixing compounds, they know exactly which emotional elements to combine to create an explosion of shame in your chest. Jessica Martinez hired a life coach after feeling stuck in her career. Marcus Rivera had glowing testimonials, a warm social media presence, and a gentle way of speaking that made her feel immediately at ease. He specialized in authentic leadership, exactly what she needed. For months, their sessions were transformative. He encouraged her to speak her truth, to honor her feelings, to step into her power. She began setting boundaries at work, expressing her needs, advocating for herself. It felt like awakening. But then came the session where she needed to reschedule, not cancel, just move their appointment because of a family emergency. A reasonable request, made with plenty of notice. His response arrived as a voice message. His tone was different, not angry, but disappointed, wounded. Jessica, I have to say, I'm really surprised by this. After all the work we've done on commitment and showing up for yourself, I didn't expect you to prioritize other people's emergencies over your own growth. I just hope you're not sabotaging your progress because the work is getting uncomfortable. She listened 3 times, her stomach churning. Suddenly, a reasonable request felt like betrayal. A family emergency became someone else's drama. Taking care of her sister became prioritizing others over herself. She called back immediately, apologizing profusely. She canceled her plans and kept the original appointment, because disappointing him felt worse than abandoning her family. That's the guilt game. It weaponizes your own values against you. If you care about commitment, they'll make you feel guilty for needing flexibility. If you value loyalty, they'll make you feel guilty for questioning them. Dr. Martha Stout calls this the conscience gap, the space between people who feel guilt and those who exploit it. They don't punish you with anger, they punish you with disappointment, with withdrawal, with subtle implications that you're not who they thought you were. The guilt game has several variations. The spiritual guilt trip. I thought you were more evolved than this. The relationship guilt trip. After everything I've done for you. The professional guilt trip. I expected more from someone in your position. Each version makes you question not just your actions, but your character. Am I ungrateful? Am I selfish? The questions multiply, eating away at your confidence until you're willing to do anything to make that terrible feeling stop. You begin to trim away parts of yourself to avoid the sting. You shrink your needs. You edit your tone. You pre-apologize for having feelings. You hide your boundaries in soft phrases like, I was just wondering, or it's probably my fault, but have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling like you needed to apologize when you were the one who was hurt? Have you ever felt like asserting yourself somehow made you the villain? That's the guilt game. And it's just round 2. The next phase is even trickier, because this time, they won't manipulate you with shame. They'll manipulate you with something that feels like love, something that feels like destiny. Round 3 is about identity, and in it, the person across from you stops being your opponent and starts becoming your mirror. Round 3, Tug of War, the mirror trap. Wow, it's like we're the same person. At first, that sentence feels like cosmic connection, a soulmate moment, the kind of eerie synchronicity that makes you believe in fate. Someone finally understands you, not just your words, but your silences, Not just your thoughts, but your dreams. Not just your fears, but the specific texture of your childhood nightmares. But what if it's not synchronicity? What if it's strategy? Round 3 is the mirror trap, the most seductive round of the empathy game. Here, the dark empath doesn't oppose you. They become you. They become a highly engineered version of you, carefully constructed from your own words, your forgotten wounds, your secret hopes. They study you with doctoral intensity, absorbing every detail until you forget where you end and they begin. Dr. Amanda Liu was a successful psychiatrist who thought she was beyond manipulation. At 38, she'd diagnosed every personality disorder and prided herself on spotting deception. But then she met Dr. Rebecca Chen at a trauma conference, and everything changed. The connection was immediate and uncanny. Both were first-generation immigrants with tiger parents who valued achievement over emotion. Both had chosen psychiatry to heal family traumas. Both struggled with imposter syndrome despite obvious competence. Both had complicated relationships with their mothers, similar taste in literature, and the same habit of working late to avoid empty apartments. "I've never met anyone who understands this specific kind of loneliness," Amanda confided. Rebecca nodded with tears in her eyes. "It's like you're describing my own life." They became instant friends, late-night phone calls, weekend hiking trips, shared meals where they unpacked wounds with unprecedented honesty. Amanda found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone. Not her therapist, not her journal, not even her conscious mind. The synchronicities multiplied. Rebecca had also been betrayed by her best friend in high school. She'd also had a complicated relationship with a mentor who'd crossed boundaries. She'd also struggled with an eating disorder she'd hidden from everyone. It was almost too perfect, but perfection felt like healing. Until the day Amanda discovered her own words staring back at her from Rebecca's published research paper. Not similar ideas, her exact words, phrases lifted from private conversations, personal insights shared in confidence, specific case studies mentioned in passing, all presented as Rebecca's original work. The mirror hadn't just reflected her, it had stolen her reflection entirely. In The Sociopath Next Door, Dr. Stout reveals that sociopaths are masters of mimicry, not because they feel what you feel, but because they don't. That emotional emptiness creates space to watch, to echo, to absorb your identity without the messy interference of their own authentic self. This isn't just imitation, it's identity theft of the soul. The mirror trap exploits our deepest need, to be understood. After a lifetime of feeling different, finding someone who seems to share your exact experience feels like winning the emotional lottery. But they don't see the world through your eyes. They see you through their predatory lens, cataloging every detail that makes you tick so they can replicate it later. The process is methodical. Data collection. Probing questions disguised as intimate conversation. Mirroring, reflecting your thoughts, feelings, and experiences back to you. Synthesis. Weaving your stories into their own narrative. Exploitation. Using your own psychology against you. Once you're hooked on feeling understood, they begin to bend the mirror. You mention a boundary, and they say, "That doesn't sound like you." You express fear, and they respond, "I thought you were braver than that." Gradually, you find yourself defending parts of yourself you never questioned. You start editing your thoughts to match their reflection. You lose track of who you actually are versus who they think you should be. Have you ever felt someone mirrored you too perfectly? Like they'd studied your personality and rehearsed your thoughts? Have you ever felt simultaneously seen and somehow emptied by someone's understanding? That's the mirror trap. Unlike regular mirrors, it doesn't shatter cleanly. It warps gradually, distorting your self-image until you can't tell what's real and what's reflection. But the mirror trap is just set up for round 4, where the game reaches its most twisted crescendo. When you finally push back, when you question their version of you, they don't argue, they don't defend themselves. They do something far more devastating. They cry, they break down, they shatter first. And suddenly, you become the monster in a story you didn't know was being written. Round 4, Marbles, the Victim's Mask. "I can't believe you'd say that, after everything I've done for you." That sentence arrives with trembling lips, watery eyes, and a voice that cracks with apparent devastation. And in that moment, everything inside you stalls. Your arguments dissolve. Your boundaries blur. Your reality tilts. Because suddenly, they're the wounded one. And you're the villain in a story you didn't know was being written. Round 4 is the cruelest twist in the empathy game. It's like the marbles round. The rules change halfway through, and you're the last to know. You thought you were protecting yourself. They claim you're attacking them. You thought you were setting a boundary. They say you're abandoning them. Michael Thompson learned this the hard way. After 6 months of what he thought was a healthy relationship, he realized he needed to end things with Sarah. No cheating, no fights, no betrayals. Just a quiet recognition that they weren't compatible. Sarah, I care about you deeply, but I think we want different things. I don't think this relationship is working for either of us. He expected sadness, maybe anger. What he didn't expect was the phone call 3 days later from her best friend. How could you do this to her? She's been suicidal since you left. She's not eating, not sleeping. She keeps saying you abandoned her when she needed you most. More calls followed, from her sister, her coworker, her therapist, all with the same message. Sarah was falling apart, and Michael was the reason. She had told them he'd ghosted her without explanation, that he'd promised her a future and then vanished when she got too real. None of it was true, but it was believable. And Sarah's tears, her genuine distress, her apparent fragility, it all painted a picture of a heartless man who'd discarded a vulnerable woman. Michael found himself defending a respectful breakup, explaining his actions to people who'd already made up their minds, and questioning whether he really was the monster everyone seemed to think he was. Welcome to the victim's mask, one of the most powerful weapons in the dark empath's arsenal. Dr. Martha Stout calls this the pitiful tale, the sociopath's favorite tool. Most of us assume predators roar, but the most effective predators whimper, because tears disarm better than threats, and nothing wins sympathy faster than a well-performed breakdown. The victim's mask accomplishes several things. Flips the emotional burden. You become the one providing comfort and justification, but mobilizes their support network. Others rush to comfort the victim without hearing your side. Weaponizes your empathy. Seeing someone in distress triggers your protective instincts. Creates false narrative. The story becomes about their pain, not their behavior. The mask has several variations. The abandonment victim. You're leaving me just like everyone else. The misunderstood victim. You don't understand what I'm going through. The traumatized victim. This is triggering my PTSD. The sacrificial victim. I gave you everything. Each version makes you question not just your actions, but your character. Were you too harsh? Are you heartless? The questions multiply until you're willing to do anything to make that terrible feeling stop. You start to believe you're the problem, that you're too sensitive, too demanding, too emotional. You internalize their narrative until it becomes your inner voice. Have you ever walked away from a toxic relationship only to be branded heartless? Have you ever watched someone weaponize their mental health struggles to control your behavior? Have you ever felt like you couldn't address harmful behavior because they were going through a hard time? That's the victim's mask. It doesn't hide weakness. It weaponizes it. It doesn't conceal vulnerability. It exploits it. And the moment you see through it, truly see through it, the game shifts again. Not because they'll confront you honestly, not because they'll apologize, but because they'll deploy the nuclear option, they disappear. Because in round 5, the punishment for recognizing the game isn't argument or anger, it's abandonment. And unlike the victim's mask, which gives you something to respond to, abandonment gives you nothing but the haunting echo of your own voice calling into the void. Round 5, Glass Bridge, the disappearing act. No warning, no closure, no explanation, just silence. One day, they're messaging you constantly, checking in, offering concern. The next day, they're gone, vanish like a therapist who walks out mid-session, never to return. And the worst part, you think it's your fault. A welcome to round 5, the glass bridge. For months, every step felt safe, solid, predictable. You learned to trust the routine, until one word, one question, one moment of misaligned energy, and suddenly you're falling. Not from betrayal, because betrayal would be something. You're falling from nothing, from absence, from the complete erasure of your existence from their world. Dr. James Reeves thought he'd found his spiritual mentor. At 45, after an emotionally empty corporate career, he was searching for deeper meaning. When he discovered Daniel Wright's YouTube channel, thousands of followers, profound insights, a gentle presence, he felt he'd found his guide. Daniel offered individual mentoring for his inner circle. Their conversations were transformative. Hours discussing shadow work, spiritual bypassing, wounded healer archetypes. Daniel understood James's struggles with uncanny precision. They quoted the same books, referenced the same teachers, shared similar childhood experiences. Their relationship deepened beyond mentor and student. Late-night texts about breakthrough moments. Shared meals exploring psychology and spirituality. Daniel even invited James to co-facilitate a workshop. For the first time, James felt seen not just as a successful lawyer, but as a whole human being. The relationship felt sacred, transformative, life-changing. Until the day James questioned something Daniel had said in a live stream. Not aggressively, not publicly, just a private message asking for clarification about a contradiction. The response was immediate and absolute: silence. Not delayed responses or brief answers, complete radio silence. Unfollowed on social media, blocked on messaging apps, removed from the private group. It was as if James had never existed. Weeks passed. James kept checking his phone, convinced there must be a technical glitch. Maybe Daniel was going through a difficult time. Maybe he was overwhelmed. The explanations multiplied in his mind, each more desperate than the last. Then James saw it, a live stream where Daniel was sharing a story about toxic energy and spiritual bypass. The story was familiar, too familiar, because it was James's story. His childhood trauma, his relationship with his father, his struggle with perfectionism, all shared anonymously as an example of what happens when someone isn't ready for real spiritual work. The betrayal was complete. Daniel had disappeared without explanation and weaponized James's most vulnerable confessions as content for his brand. In The Sociopath Next Door, Dr. Stout identifies this as one of the sociopath's most devastating tactics: punishment through abandonment. It's not dramatic, it's not violent, it's simply nothing. But that nothing is precisely calibrated to create maximum psychological damage. The disappearing act is effective because it denies closure. Humans need narrative completion. This leaves all questions unanswered. It weaponizes your empathy. You make excuses for their behavior, worry about their well-being. It triggers abandonment trauma. The sudden loss taps into primal fears of being left alone. It makes you the villain. You fill the blanks with self-blame. It isolates you. How do you explain being devastated by someone's silence? The silence isn't just absence, it's presence. The presence of deliberate cruelty disguised as nothing at all. It's psychological warfare conducted through the weapon of withholding. You start to prefer even bad communication to none at all. You'd rather be yelled at than ignored. You'd rather be criticized than erased. Have you ever kept your phone on at night, hoping for just one text? Anything to confirm you weren't completely erased? Have you ever found yourself apologizing to silence, crafting messages you'll never send? Have you ever felt like you were going crazy because everyone else moved on while you remained frozen? That's round 5. It's quiet devastation. It's being gaslit by absence. It's learning that sometimes the cruelest word is no word at all. But there is one more round, and this one isn't about them anymore. It's about you. It's about the choice that will determine whether you spend the rest of your life chasing ghosts, or whether you finally find the courage to step off the field entirely. Round 6, Squid Game, the final door. No rules, no tricks, no masks, just a door. And on the other side is your freedom. But here's the paradox of round 6. It doesn't look like victory. It looks like defeat. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like losing. Because to everyone else, walking away seems like quitting, like giving up, like admitting you weren't strong enough to make it work. But you know better. You've played every round. You've bled through every silence. You've questioned every instinct. You've apologized for every boundary. And now, finally, you understand the only way to win a rigged game is to stop playing it altogether. This is the final door. It doesn't swing open from the outside. No one can push it open for you. It opens from within, but only after you stop seeking closure from people who never intended to give it. Only after you stop looking for validation from people who never saw you as fully human. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at this door for 3 months before finding the courage to walk through it. For 2 years, she'd been caught in the web of Dr. Richard Holbrook, a renowned trauma therapist who'd gradually become her mentor, friend, and emotional captor. What began as professional admiration had evolved into something that felt profound, but left her constantly drained, confused, and questioning her reality. The final straw came during a conference where Richard publicly dismissed her research as derivative and emotionally immature. research inspired by their private conversations about her healing journey. When she tried to address it privately, he deployed every weapon: charm, guilt, mirror trap, victim mask, and finally, the disappearing act. Elena found herself in the familiar spiral, replaying conversations, analyzing words, wondering if she was too sensitive, too demanding, too much. She'd been here before. She knew the dance. But this time, something was different. Instead of trying to solve the puzzle of his behavior, she asked herself, what if there is no puzzle? What if this is simply who he is? The question changed everything, because once she stopped looking for the key to unlock his empathy, she could see what was actually there. A brilliant, charming, manipulative person who used others' vulnerabilities as entertainment. She didn't send the email. She didn't make the call. She simply stopped. Not dramatically, not with grand gestures. She just quietly removed herself from the game. It didn't feel powerful at first. It felt empty, like giving up. For weeks, she questioned the decision. Her nervous system, trained to seek his approval, would spike with anxiety every time she resisted the urge to reach out. But slowly, something shifted. The constant anxiety began to fade. She stopped checking her phone obsessively. She stopped analyzing his social media for hidden messages. She stopped crafting responses to conversations that would never happen. And then, one morning, she realized she hadn't thought about him in 3 days. That night, she slept without the familiar knot of tension. That weekend, she laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. That's when she knew the game was over. Not because she'd won it, but because she'd outgrown it. In The Sociopath Next Door, Dr. Stout offers this liberating truth. Sociopaths don't change. They don't wake up and develop empathy. They don't have breakthrough moments. They don't grow or heal like healthy people. This means every moment spent trying to make them see is time stolen from your own healing. Every energy spent trying to change them is energy not invested in your own life. The greatest twist in the empathy game, it was never about changing them. It was always about choosing you. What if your silence wasn't weakness, but wisdom? What if your withdrawal wasn't abandonment, but self-rescue? What if walking away, without explanation, without permission, was the most radical act of self-love you could perform? The final door requires you to trust your experience over everyone else's opinions. It requires you to value your peace over their understanding. It requires you to choose your sanity over their approval. When you walk through that door, you don't just leave them behind. You leave behind the part of yourself that thought love required suffering. You leave behind the part that believed you had to earn basic respect. What's waiting on the other side isn't dramatic. It's something quieter, but infinitely more valuable. Peace. The deep cellular peace that comes from no longer fighting battles that were never yours to fight. On the other side is the person you were before you learned to twist yourself into unrecognizable shapes. The person who knew their worth without external validation. The person who could love without losing themselves. That person has been waiting for you this whole time. They've been standing at the door, ready to welcome you home to yourself. But the door won't open unless you choose to walk through it. And when you do, don't look back. Not because you're angry, not because you're bitter, but because you've finally remembered that your life is not a game to be won or lost. It's a gift to be lived. Step off the field. You've made it. 6 rounds. 6 brutal psychological layers unmasked. You've seen how charm can be a trap, how guilt becomes a leash, how mirrors distort your soul. You've witnessed how they wear the victim's mask, how they disappear to haunt you with silence, and how the only real victory is refusing to play their game. But now this story is no longer about them. It's about you, and the choice that will define everything that comes next. You are not too emotional. You are emotionally intelligent. You are not too sensitive. You are consciously aware. You are not too much. You are authentically human. You are not broken. You are in a rigged game designed to punish the very qualities that make you beautiful. And now, you've stepped off the field. You've refused to play a game built by people who never understood genuine connection. You've chosen sanity over their approval, peace over their drama, truth over their lies. That decision, that quiet rebellion, is your victory. Not because you conquered them, but because you reclaimed yourself. Your story matters. Your experience has value. Your survival is not just personal, it's political. In a world full of wolves wearing sheep's clothing, your ability to recognize the predator behind the smile could save someone's life. So here's your mirror moment. Not the distorted reflection they showed you, but the real one. The The one that shows your strength, your wisdom, your capacity for both love and appropriate boundaries. What round almost broke you? Was it the charm that made you doubt your instincts? The guilt that made you question your worth? The mirror trap that stole your identity? The victim mask that made you the villain? The disappearing act that left you haunted? Or the final door that required you to choose yourself? What round finally woke you up? When did you realize their empathy was performance? When did you see through their tears to the calculation beneath? When did you understand that their silence was deliberate cruelty? Share your story in the comments below. Not for their validation. They're not listening anymore. Share it for the person who needs to hear that they're not crazy, they're not alone, and they're not the problem. Share it for the person who's still wondering if they're too sensitive. Share it for the person standing at their own final door. Let this video become your voice, your validation, your closure. Because sometimes healing happens in the comments section of a YouTube video. When someone shares their truth and another person responds, "Me too. I thought I was the only one." Subscribe if you're ready for the next revelation. Next week, we're diving into the hidden blueprint of gaslighting, where truth gets twisted until you forget your own name. Remember, they studied your wounds just to see where you'd bleed, but now you guard your scars like sacred ground. They tried to make you smaller, quieter, more convenient, but now you take up space like it's your birthright. They wanted to keep you playing their game forever, but now you're teaching others how to flip the board. Your healing is not just personal, it's revolutionary. In a world that profits from your self-doubt, your self-knowledge is rebellion. In a system that thrives on your confusion, your clarity is warfare. So, share your story, claim your voice, trust your instincts, set your boundaries, choose your peace. The person who tried to convince you that you were too much was simply not enough to hold all of who you are. The game is over. You won, not by playing better, but by refusing to play at all. Welcome to your freedom.